Welcome everyone to another edition of Play It Through, and on this edition we continue our look at Super Mario All-Stars, this time tackling Super Mario Bros. 2, the North American version, aka Super Mario Bros. USA as it's known in Japan. Super Mario 2 may be the black sheep of the classic original NES Mario titles, but it is one of my personal favorite games of all time. In fact, it was the very first video I ever did infamously, and also happens to have a lot of stuff in it that would be seen later on. It kind of set the groundwork as far as a lot of the enemy types and certain other aspects of Mario that we would later see in future Mario games. So here we go with Super Mario Bros. 2 for the Super Nintendo. When we start the game, I'm going to show the opening story to kind of get you into it before getting to the character select screen. For this run of the game, since there are 4 playable characters, Mario, Luigi, Toad, and Peach, I will be switching it up every level, changing to a different character, starting with Mario and then working my way through. The amount of levels in the game, since there are 20, this allows us to play as each one of the characters a total of 5 times. Now, I will be running through a lot of levels relatively quickly. I won't be showcasing every part of every single one of the stage, but I will be completing every one of the levels, not using any of the warps throughout. If you're using, of course, like Luigi, or you do a super jump off some enemies' heads, you can kind of skip this portion of the level, and to the left, of course, there is also that hidden door that will instantly take you to where Berto is located. But we're going to take the long way around, heading over here and climbing up the ninjas, working our way to the top portion here. The coolest thing about Mario 2, of course, was the addition of having like all these pullable objects you can pull out of the ground that led, of course, to stuff like radishes and the like to take out enemies, POW blocks, turtle shells, extra lives, and of course the magic potions, which would take you to the alternate world where you could potentially pull out items to get coins for the slot machine at the end of each level, or even get a giant mushroom which would increase your health counter. Always annoyed me though that the health counter wasn't permanently changed once you found one of these mushrooms, but if it did, of course the game would end up being way too easy. After taking out the first Berto and entering inside of the door, we then move on to level 2 where we'll be playing as Luigi. As the level begins, we're going to use this Pidget, move him back and forth on his magic carpet, throwing him off of it, and then ride the magic carpet over to the right side, and if you time your jump just correctly, after avoiding a few Bezos along the way, you can actually get on top of the area right over here, and thus skip a decent portion of this stage. Once they're over here, just kind of run past the Sniffit that's located here. My personal favorite enemy of all Super Mario Bros. Is always going to be Sniffit. And we enter into the next battle against Berto. Identical to the first one, so in case you didn't know, you have to jump on top of the eggs, pick them up as Berto fires them out, and then fire them back at Berto in order to do damage. Berto, of course, is a bit androgynous, mislabeled as far as gender is concerned in the manual, and there's always been confusion. I've always thought that Berto was a guy that just was feminine, but of course there's been a whole bunch of rewrites and different considerations. In Japan, Berto is actually known as Catherine, so that would kind of make a little bit of sense. If it was a male character named Catherine, it would just be a little bit more confusing, so whichever way it is, Berto is awesome, and of course we'll see a lot of Berto in later games as far as Mario was concerned. A lot of the spin-off titles, we would get to see a lot of Berto. After getting into this area here, we're going to stack up one of these mushroom blocks and then use a super jump by ducking for a period of time, which of course makes us flash. Once that happens, we can then do that big jump and allowing us to get up to higher platforms, continuing doing that in order to reach this door up here where we run into Phanto for the first time. Phanto activates if you pick up the key located in his room. I love the Super Mario All-Stars version of these rooms because you have that giant glowing Phanto in the back, so when you pick up the giant key, Phanto's eyes start glowing before you exit the room, and then he starts chasing you all around. Thankfully, if you throw the key, Phanto stops chasing you and goes off screen, allowing you to kind of get a little bit of your bearings. But for the most part, usually I try to keep a hold of that key as long as I can and just let Phanto do that giant chase against me. While I don't end up collecting a lot of them on purpose, the power stars, the invincibility stars, will end up spawning if you collect a certain number of the cherries. Entering inside the door here, though, we end up making it to the first real boss of the game, being, of course, Mauser, another one of the great enemies from this game and never gets enough love. Mauser is amazing and should be in many, many more Mario titles. I'm holding out hope maybe he'll appear in a future title. For Mauser, he throws a lot of bombs out at us, and this gives us the ability to grab the bombs in midair, pick them up off the ground, and then we have to throw them back onto his platform before they explode. If he's caught in the explosion, you do damage to him, and after 3 explosions, he's done, and we're moving on to World 2. The second world of Mario 2 is the first of the 2 desert-themed levels, along with World 6 that we'll explore later on. We are also introduced to a flurry of new enemies, including the Cobrats, aka the Cobras that are here, as well as the extremely annoying and deadly Panzers. These are the flower-like enemy that ends up shooting fire up into the air, usually in an arcing pattern that can be pretty deadly to try to avoid, just as deadly as the Hammer Brothers from the original Mario. When we make it into this door here, we have the new mechanic of having to dig our way through all of this sand that has built up. You have to keep digging, avoiding a lot of the shy guys throughout this area, including ones that, even if you pass them, when they end up coming back after bouncing off the wall, they could potentially fall on you and end up doing damage, so you always want to avoid that. When you get to the bottom, you're going to head down this ladder into this door here and enter into the Berto battle for 2-1. This is another classic Berto, but this time around we have holes on the left and right sides, making things a little bit more difficult than the other battles we've dealt with thus far, though the Berto fights, of course, get much, much harder as we make it a little bit farther in. We're going to switch back over to Mario once again, and as the level begins, we're going to bounce our way off some of the skeleton rib cages that are kind of scattered throughout here, watching out for more Cobrats, and the quicksand that is set up that will try to pull you in. Of course, mashing the jump button will help you avoid getting pulled underneath. Lot of the Pokies and Cobrats throughout this area. There's the Panzers, which thankfully we're just going to run underneath of to avoid their fire before heading down the beanstalk at the end. Once down here again, we're going to start digging our way through the sand just like we did in 2-1. Had to be a little bit more careful. The quarters are a little bit smaller in this area, and thus the shy guys have a little bit better of an opportunity to end up falling and landing on us. When I get a little bit farther down, I'm going to maneuver my way to this spot so that I can kind of fall, grab the cherry. Not that that's necessarily what I'm going for, but that big gap allows me not to have to dig as much. Then, when you get to the part where you can pick left or right, make sure you pick the right side so you end up making it to the door at the very bottom. Once you're inside here, though, here is the next fight against a Berto, but this time it's the red Berto. The difference here is every so often, instead of the eggs, Berto can fire out a fireball, which of course is quite deadly. Still fires out in the kind of combo of 3 in a row before it ends up stopping for a bit to give you an opportunity to attack it, making things a little bit tougher. But if you pick up the mushroom block, take that up with you, that'll really end up aiding you as far as this fight's concerned, and is good practice, because most of the Berto fights as we get farther in are pretty much like this. Either these ones, the red ones, or the green ones later on that do nothing but fireballs. Here we're going to, of course, pick Luigi again and continue over to the far right side, jumping a lot of the path along the way. Pretty much, I love being able to kind of like combo jumps in this game. It's just so satisfying, especially with Luigi. The jump off of an enemy's head, jump off a platform, and just kind of keep that momentum going as I make it farther. When I drop down here, you'll notice the locked door, which means we're going to have to find that key where Fanto is located, so that means we have to start digging throughout the sand. We've gotten pretty used to this by now, so just keep on digging through that sand, doing your best to avoid the shy guys as they maneuver back and forth in this area. Eventually, you'll make it to, once again, a choice of the left or right sides, though, unlike before, there's not a dead end here. Either way will still lead to the Fanto door, so pick whichever one you like, though the right side is a bit easier to deal with, less shy guys there. Enter inside the door, jump on top, and grab the key, watching out for Fanto as he, of course, will then become alive, and now you've got to quickly move your way back through the sand, which is all, of course, refilled back in while we were in that door. and just have to kind of keep jumping. If you head towards like mainly the center part of the screen, this usually gives you a decent amount of momentum and speed on either side to get away from Phanto and work your way up. Once you make it to the top, unlock the door, and then you're going to head into a room that thankfully is no Berto fight here, just kind of a long room. The music changes up to make things a little bit more intense, but pretty easy. Just watch out for the one Panzer firing at those fireballs, pick up the crystal ball, and enter into the door, where we're going to enter into the first fight against Tri Clyde. Tri Clyde is a three-headed cobra, basically. We're going to pick up these blocks and then jump off this block here and throw them over to the right side, hitting the Tri Clyde. After 3 hits, he ends up dropping, and thankfully there's a large amount of space in this room so you can easily get away from the fireballs as he fires out. Once he's done though, we're moving on to World 3. As we begin World 3, we're going to switch on over the Toad, and World 3 is another one of the plains-themed levels or grassland-themed stages with a cool little waterfall at the beginning, and then when we go through the door, we have to actually work our way up a waterfall, which can be a little bit blinding if you're looking a little bit too close up at your screen. This is a good example when you were a kid. Don't stare too closely at the screen. It may end up causing eye damage. Either way, when you climb up to the top, grab the Pidgeot off of his magic carpet and ride that up, watching out for Bezos along the way. As long as you're a little bit off of the left or right side, usually the Bezos kind of just pass you by. When you get up to the very top though, jump off of that magic carpet before it disappears so that you're able to grab the beanstalk and head up into the clouds. Here, there's one of those green panzers waiting for you, which are stationary, but they fire straight up into the air, being annoying. Then, there's another panzer just to the right of that, but you can grab a mushroom platform thing and throw that at him to take him out. And then, there's a blue panzer, so you have all 3 types of the panzers to deal with. The blue ones are able to move around a lot easier and fire out those annoying waves of fire, but either way, we enter into this room, take out a very simple Berto fight, and move on to 3-2. Here we're going to get to play as Peach again, which works out great because this is a level that you can really cheese for sure by having Peach as your character. So even if you're changing it up a little bit, even if you like one character more than the others, I always recommend if you're playing this game, just pick Peach for this level. Take out the Panzer using the vegetables to the left, and then continue over to the right where you can grab this POW block. There's a couple of Shy Guys riding Ostros, take those guys out, then do a Peach jump hover over to the left side and head down this ladder. Once down here and get to the next ladder, you want to do another running Peach hover to get to the next ladder on the left side. Then use the bombs that are located here to drop at the right moments in order to blow open the blocks on this left wall, then climb up this ladder here, leading right to the exit of the stage, or right to the end of the stage at least. Once you enter in here though, here's another battle against one of the Bertos, this time another red one. Pick up the blocks on the left side if you want to and throw them at Berto. Pretty easy fight. You can speed things up by grabbing the blocks, but then of course you put yourself at risk. Either way, once Berto is taken care of, grab that crystal, work your way along the bottom, and head to 3-3. This, of course, leads us now to being Mario once again in the 3rd and final level of World 3. There's a potion located here if you want it. I'm just going to pick it up and throw it, though, just so you guys know where it's located, I guess. Then in this room, you're going to do a little bit of a shortcut. Use the ninjas that are moving back and forth, and then use a super jump, and if you time it right, you can get easily up to this platform. No matter which character you're playing as, they have enough of a jump to do that. Then in the next room, you have a whole bunch of these little pots that are spawning Shy Guys nonstop. The first time through, we're just heading upwards, so it's very easy to dodge all the Shy Guys as we work our way up, eventually to this door here, which is the location of the Phanto key. Grab the key, head back on through, and now you have to kind of move back and forth, left and right, slowly working your way down this series of platforms. It can be a bit annoying to do so while watching out for the Shy Guys and the Phantos. Just take your time, throw the key if you need to kind of catch your breath or get the Shy Guys to move around, whatever is needed. Once you have the key though, go back in this room, you want to make sure you run to the left and skip the first door, and there's the locked one. Also, it's very annoying, but if you end up dying once you have the key and go back through that door into that room previous to this one, you end up having to go all the way back through the other room to get back to the key, because it spawns you wherever you last used the door. I always found that very annoying, and I always seemed to have very bad luck when it came to that room. Here, though, we're going to head on upwards and use this door located here, taking us into this chamber, and then start heading upwards. Use this chain on the left here, and you're going to get past the panzers that are trying to fire the fireballs at you, and then you need to basically shimmy your way from chain to chain. Climb on one of the chains, and when you do so, make sure you go all the way up so the panzers are unable to hit you with the fire, eventually making it to the far right chain, and then entering the door past the sniffet. In here, watch out for the sparks that are moving all along the different platforms. It's a bit tricky to kind of do so. Work your way all the way up to the far right column, and then you have an easier viewpoint of the ones to the left. There's a lot of sparks here as we're trying to make our way to the door located at the top after going up this ladder here. Once we're outside here, we have this area here. You can pick up this turtle shell if you want and use that to take out the ninjas. It moves really slow, so you can actually outrun it very easily, but it's still kind of cool to watch a whole bunch of enemies get knocked down by it. Enter inside of the door, and here's our rematch against Mauser. This fight's a little bit harder than the first one. You have that spark kind of going around, making things a little bit more difficult, as well as it takes more hits to take out Mauser, but still a pretty easy fight overall. In the original Japanese version of this game, known as Doki Doki Panic, there's actually a third Mauser fight that you normally would end up having, though thankfully we don't have that in this version. Instead, we ended up getting the boss known as Claw Grip. World 4 is easily one of my favorites in the game because it is the ice-themed stage, though it does have, of course, plenty of slippery platforms. It also introduces another one of my favorite enemies from the game, the Flurries. I don't know, just for some reason their animation of them kind of skidding on the ice and just moving back and forth always ended up amusing me as a kid. Over here on the far right, though, we're going to grab this seemingly inconspicuous plant that turns into a rocket ship, taking us far up into the air. From here, you have these Shy Guys riding vehicles, able to launch out fireballs towards us. A bit of an annoying thing, but you can actually throw off the Shy Guy and ride the vehicle if you want to. You can't change directions on it or anything, but it's still kind of a cool thing and something we'll actually be doing later on in this world. At the end of this area, though, there is no Berto fight. Instead, you just find the crystal and move on to 4-2, which is a relatively difficult stage. It does feature another one of the warps, which will end up taking you to World 6 in the game. But at the same time, you have to deal with all of these Bezos near the very beginning. They have an exact pattern every time. It's not random by any means, so if you've done it as enough as I have, you pretty much memorize how the Bezos are going to come at you, but it's still a little bit difficult. Don't be afraid to duck during this part. A lot of people kind of panic and jump up into the air, but if a Bezo is coming directly at the face of your character, just do a duck underneath of the one and get your bearings and then do a jump afterwards. Usually will end up helping you miss a lot of the hits. During this segment here with the whales, you can find another one of the magic potions, and as you're going through this section, hold on to that potion, and when we get to the right here, you'll be able to throw it at the platform right below this and go through that little pipe thing, and that will actually be a warp. At the end, once again, we're going to grab another one of the rocket ships from the plants and then use that to kind of bust our way up here. Pick up the Shy Guy off of the vehicle and then ride this along this spiky path so that we're able to get by. Lots of cherries also along the way, so you're usually going to end up getting an invincibility star during that, but it's hard to grab because you're moving and there's all those spikes. Then we end up having another matchup against a red Berto. The third and final level of World 4 has a pretty cool gimmick at the very beginning. Here you have a Berto, but you actually don't want to fight it. Instead, you want to jump on the Berto's egg and ride that along a large portion of this ocean until you end up making it to another set of platforms. Once you're over here, though, you're going to enter inside the castle and start heading on upwards, watching out for the spikes below and plenty of flurries that are trying to work their way downwards, trying to hit you as they make their way down the platforms. When you make it to the top of this section, enter inside the door and then run across just to the right a little bit. Enter into the second tower of the castle. Here at the beginning, right on top of this red shy guy, don't pick him up, and you can actually use him to help you get over the spike area located here and drop on down. Once you drop down to the second part though, you can jump off of him if you would like to. Grab a couple of cherries, but mainly you just want to make sure you make this door. Once you reach the door, jump on up, grab the key away from the Phanto, and then quickly get back to the door while watching out for the flurries, and then start heading on down. Along the way, of course, we're dealing with the ice, the flurries, and Phanto chasing us. Be careful with the key when you throw it. Of course, it can be sometimes a pain to grab it, especially with the flurries trying to run around as well. The whole area will open up a little bit. Be sure to watch out for the pit on the far right and enter into the locked door. Once in here, head to the right just another little tiny few steps away and enter into the next door where you'll find the crystal and enter into the boss chamber against Fry Guy. Now, Fry Guy is a very unique boss that he takes 3 hits to defeat, but when you defeat him, he breaks apart into 4 little flames that move around. It can be difficult at times to time when to pick up one of the blocks. Like me, I end up getting hit anyway by one of them. If you do just right with the block, you can actually take out all the flames in a single throw, but if not, you still have to be very careful. Try to maneuver around as best as possible, and once they are all extinguished, we're moving on to World 5. Back to the beginning with the characters here as we're taking control of Mario. Watch out for this Panzer here, jumping over him, and then head on down to the bottom part and enter into the next door. This room here is a bit annoying as you have this waterfall in the background, and you actually have to not only jump across the logs, but also across the fish that are jumping out of the water below, and use them as platforms. So be careful, make sure you don't accidentally pick one of them up while jumping, or you're probably going to end up dying down into the vast pit. After that segment, you're going to find your first green Berto of the game. Once again, this is the ones that fire out nothing but flames, and because of that, it can be annoying to battle them. Time the pickups of the weapon as best as possible. Usually the best time is to wait for him to fire out a series of 3 shots, in which case he will hesitate for just a moment, allowing you to pick up the block and throw it at him before the process continues. Next up is 5-2. Head over to the right side and jump up the ladder, and once you're out into the main area here, we're going to start heading right, watching out for the enemies coming at us, the Ostros, the bug guys kind of moving up and down on the trees themselves, and a few porcupines along the way. Easily another one of my favorite enemies for sure. Porcupines are awesome. How can you not like them? For the most part, though, a relatively straightforward level until you end up reaching the beanstalk on the far right side. Start climbing up this large vine, and along the way, you have a few enemies, including Sniffets on the left and right side, as well as Bezos flying across the screen. Usually a little bit above us, so even if you're moving at full speed, you should be able to dodge them. Once you make it to the top here, pick up the POW block and you'll start falling. Be careful and maneuver your way between all of the spikes that are located against the floors of this area. It's a bit hard to do so, and as you're falling, it's really tricky because you got to make sure that you land safely on either the right side or on one of these pieces of bridge so you don't fall into the water. Then in the next room, you'll have to deal with a couple of fish jumping while you battle a red Berto. Moving on to the third level of world number 5. Start off by heading up the first ladder, of course, that we end up coming to, and then start heading on over. Here you're going to have a lot of bombs to deal with, including the albatrosses that are flying overhead trying to drop the bombs down on top of you while going through. You can kind of outrun a lot of them as they're falling, but eventually you will have to either do a super jump or bounce off one of their heads to get up to this platform here, at least if you're playing as Toad. If you're playing as Luigi, obviously, he can make that jump no problem. Head down the ladder located here and run across the top portion. There's a couple of bombs there, and then you'll have an annoying Panzer as you're making your way through this area. Once into this section here, you have sparks rotating around and platforms for you to pick up. You can then use the little blocks in order to stop up the Shy Guy spawners that are throughout this area. You can also use these blocks to take out the sparks when going through this area to help you out as well. Just kind of take your time, know what you're kind of getting into here, and you should be able to make your way through. Once you're done that part, head on up here and watch out for a couple of bombs falling down. I do recommend picking up one of these blocks and take it with you, as we have a couple of panzers, the blue ones, that are going to move on down through these diagonal placed platforms while also firing out plenty of fireballs in our direction. Unfortunately, if you don't bring one of those blocks, you may end up getting hit like I do, or you still may end up getting hit because it's a little bit difficult to dodge them, and then you're back outside. Use a vegetable like I do, or just pick up the Pidgeot off of the magic carpet and ride that over to the right side. There is another Pidgeot moving back and forth here, but you don't need to grab that one. Land safely on the platform or the clouds, dodging a few more Shy Guys before making it over to this red Berto. Once you're able to defeat the red Berto, though, it's time to enter into the boss fight against Claw Grip. This is the fight that originally was an albino Mauser fight that was just deemed a little bit too difficult to deal with. Claw Grip is pretty cool though. He grabs rocks from the right side and throws them out towards you. They bounce off of this little platform here, and then you're able to pick them up and throw them back at him. Just do your best to kind of stay out of the way of them as he's throwing them. I usually like to stand right about here, but unfortunately, he sometimes gets stuck in like a little bit of a pattern where he just keeps throwing them over my head, so I'm unable to grab them and throw them at him. But just stay patient. Eventually, he will end up throwing them where you need him to, so that you'll be able to pick them up and throw them back at him. Next, we're onwards to 6-1, which is another one of the desert-themed stages of the game. Here we start off with more quicksand and more cobrats to deal with as we run through. This is probably a level that's seen a lot, because if you use all the warps and do a quick run of the game, this is still one of the levels you will have to complete during a normal playthrough, even with warps. In this room here, you gotta make sure you go down the right one of these, the one right to the right of the second Cobrat, if that made any sense. Either way, when you go down here, you know you're on the right one. As you dig through the sand, you'll end up running into one of the Phantos. Grab the key from the Phanto located down here and quickly start jumping your way back up to the top and back outside. Once out here, though, head over to the far right and unlock the door in order to enter the boss chamber against another one of the Bertos. There's a couple of blocks here. I recommend picking them up, as you will have to deal with this green Berto, who of course will fire only fireballs. Once he's taken care of though, grab the crystal and we're heading on to 6-2. Here, once again, we're going to take control of Mario for the last time during this game, and here we're going to ride on top of this Albatos and take him for a long ride across the entire length of the level. A little bit after the beginning, you'll have to do a super jump over this Panzer that's firing out a series of fireballs. Stay on top of the Albatos though. It'll take a little bit of a lengthy journey throughout here, including a couple of super jumps that you'll need to do in order to get the higher platforms while still maintaining your ability to get back on top of the bird. It's a relatively short stage though, thankfully, while going through this. At the very end, once again, you'll have to do another super jump to get up to these platforms and get to the door located here. Once inside here, it's another one of those battles against another one of the green Bertos, and we're going to use these blocks to, of course, help us out. Once he's done, grab the crystal and move on to 6-3, the final level of World 6. Here we get to play as Luigi for the final time, and we're going to take a pretty big shortcut throughout this level. As soon as the level begins, head over to the left here in this quicksand, and once you hold the left on the D-pad and see Luigi just move a tiny bit, start mashing the jump button. Just keep on mashing that jump button while holding left, and eventually you're going to make it to a door to go through, which will bypass a majority of what you have to do here. Once inside of here, be careful jumping on these clouds. Pretty easy to do so with Luigi though, and head inside this pyramid door located here. Once you're inside here, you have another battle though against a red Berto, thankfully not a green one located here. You do get one block at your disposal though to help you out, but you can also use the eggs to do so. Once it's done, grab the crystal and move on to the battle against Tri Clyde, the second battle against him. This fight is pretty much the same as before, a little bit more difficult because Tri Clyde is on a closer platform to where you are, so it can be a little bit harder to actually dodge out of the way of all the fireballs that he ends up shooting out. Once you're able though to deliver 3 solid hits onto Tri Clyde, he's defeated, and we're moving on to the 7th and final world of Mario 2. World 7 actually only contains 2 levels, which I always found a little bit odd, but either way, they're pretty decent stages. Start off the first one by jumping on top of this albatross that's moving over to the left side. You can use this albatross over a couple of columns while traveling through, and eventually over here where you can grab a rocket. Once you make it onto this section here, head on over to the right side. There's a couple of sniffets waiting for you. You can also bypass a large portion here by using Luigi and doing a super jump off of that sniffet at the top there and jumping straight over to the column that we're going to be heading towards. But unfortunately, as Toad, we have to take a little bit of the long way around this part of the stage. Either way, climb up this ladder, whichever way you're able to get to it, and make it up here where you have a series of sparks kind of rushing through the clouds. When you make it here, you don't need to grab these blocks, which I make the mistake of grabbing because it just ends up getting me hurt. But if you time a super jump just right, you can barely grab the ladder and use that to continue up the rest of this area. Inside here, we have another one of the green Berto fights using a single block this time around, so you gotta make sure that you make the most of this one block and time your jumps and grabs correctly to take out the Berto, grabbing the crystal and moving on to the final stage of the game. Of course, the final level, no surprise, is a castle-themed stage here in the clouds, Wart's Castle to be more specific. We'll get to play as Princess one more time. And of course, I'm going to take the shortcut to make this level a lot easier. Traveling through this conveyor belt, be very careful of all the Shy Guys lining it, some ninjas right afterwards, and then a couple of bombs. As you make it to the far right of this area, there are some panzers firing fireballs, but we're able to easily jump over them. When you make it into this room here, go to the left just a little bit, grab this chain, and then what you want to do is hit right or left on the D-pad, springing off of it with a jump as soon as you do, and you'll be able to get on top of the level here. Run across over to the far right side, jumping over the other chains that are located until you make it to a chain that's located with a key. The key is normally inside of the Berto, but it doesn't end up spawning inside of it unless you come through the door that we're actually entering to get back through here. Either way, use that key in order to unlock the next door, and then once in here, pick up one of these blocks and take it with you to the far right. Grab the crystal, and the door that we normally go through will actually come alive, and we actually have to fight it. All you need to do is hit it 3 times as it's floating around with this block in order to damage it. Once you're able to do so, it will open up and take us to the final battle against Wart. Wart, another one of the very underrated Nintendo bosses of all time, and he's actually really allergic or really hates vegetables. Basically, what we need to do is grab the vegetables, and when he opens up his mouth in order to fire out the bubbles, we just throw a vegetable into his mouth. If you time it right, you'll be able to choke him with it. If not, it'll usually end up missing or end up getting destroyed by the bubbles that he fires out. This ends up being a relatively pain-in-the-butt fight, but it's still a pretty cool boss. It's one of the only types like this, I think, in the entire Mario series. And plus, seeing someone other than Bowser as a final boss with Mario was always a cool thing, and I always wish they would kind of bring Wart back in some capacity. Once you deliver, though, the final hit to Wart, you can sit back and enjoy the ending to Super Mario Bros. 2. So there you have it, Mario 2. Of course, it was all a dream as Mario goes back to sleep, thinking about all the enemies and, of course, all the names of the enemies that we got to battle throughout the course of it with their names underneath. This was actually the first time I remember an enemy roll call in a game. There was a classic amount of NES titles that did this, but this was the first one that I personally end up remembering. I also found it funny that they ended up keeping the mislabeled names of enemies, having Berto listed under Ostro's name and Ostro under Berto, and they would have well known that that was a mistake at that point, but for some reason they always kept that in, even in the Super Mario All-Stars version. I also love the snickering wart as you get to see him as it fades away, and then we get to see the end written at the top right corner. But as Mario snoozes away, that will also wrap up another episode of Play It Through. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.